Act like you're my wife, the Millionaire CEO whispered, his voice low, commanding, dangerous. In that single breath, Amber Evans's world fractured. Her humiliation became his weapon, her name his shield, and her life no longer her own. Before we jump in, I want to know, where in the world are you watching from? And what kind of story do you crave next? Drop your answer in the comments below. If stories like this grip your heart and refuse to let go, well, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. I've got another powerful story coming your way tomorrow, and trust me, you won't want to miss it. Now, let's get into today's story. The Valencia Grand Ballroom shimmered like a universe of crystal and money. Every chandelier sparkled with the price of a small house, and every smile gleamed with quiet calculation. For Amber Evans, this world was as dazzling as it was hostile, beautiful from afar, but cold up close. She wasn't supposed to be here. While the guests floated in couture and champagne, she stood near the marble staircase in a simple cocoa-colored dress, clutching her company-issued tablet like armor. She had come to monitor the live donation system for Valencia Global, not to mingle with its gods. But in a room built on power, invisibility was her only protection. Until it wasn't. "Excuse me, ma'am." 3 corporate security officers, Tony Gardner, Edward Wallace, and their new superior, Jeremy Haynes, advanced like sharks scenting blood. Their voices carried, slicing through the string quartet's polished melody. Guests turned. Champagne flutes paused midair. Amber's breath caught. "Is there a problem?" Jeremy's tone was clipped, calculated. "We've traced a breach in the system to your device. I'll need your bag." Her stomach dropped. Around her, murmurs bloomed like poison. A breach? Her? The humiliation struck fast, cold, choking. Her fingers trembled as they reached for the strap of her purse, every instinct screaming to run, to vanish, to wake up from this. I think there's a mistake," she stammered, voice breaking under the weight of judgment. But it was too late. Her belongings, her badge, her phone, her notebook, were displayed under the chandelier's merciless light, like evidence of guilt she didn't have. The crowd was feeding on the scene. A data girl caught stealing from the Empire. Her vision blurred, the sting of shame burning behind her eyes. "Don't cry. Don't give them that." But her throat was closing, breath trembling. And then, a single voice cut through the air. "Stop." It wasn't loud, but it didn't need to be. The room obeyed. Alexander Valencia stepped forward from the crowd, tall, immaculate, commanding. His navy suit caught the light like polished armor. The power in his stride was magnetic, dangerous. Conversations died mid-sentence. Cameras turned toward him. He stopped in front of her, his gaze pinning her in place. Sharp, unreadable. There was no sympathy in his eyes, only calculation and something else, something that flickered between curiosity and control. Then he leaned in, his breath brushing her ear. "Act like you're my wife." Amber froze. The words struck like a live wire. "What? Now?" he murmured, a quiet command that sounded more like fate than choice. Before she could protest, his arms slid around her waist, pulling her close with practiced confidence. She could smell his cologne, cool, expensive, intoxicating, feel the heat radiating off his body, the steadiness of his pulse against her trembling spine. "Gentlemen," Alexander said, voice calm, resonant, lethal. "You just searched my wife. I trust you had a warrant." The ballroom erupted in gasps. The word wife detonated like a bomb. Amber's world tilted. Her knees went weak, her mind blank. She could feel the weight of 100 stares, the flashing of cameras, the sudden shift in how everyone looked at her. Not as a suspect, but as a scandal. Her heart hammered in her chest. "Wife, what is he doing? Why me?" The officers faltered, Jeremy's smirk fading under Alexander's unwavering stare. "Apologize," the CEO said, voice so composed it was terrifying. "To Mrs. Valencia." Tony stammered, Edward muttered something barely audible, but Alexander didn't look away from her. His expression was carved from control, but his touch, steady on her waist, was searing, grounding, confusing. And somewhere, beneath the noise, Amber realized she was breathing again, not from calm, but from sheer disbelief. The man she had only ever seen in headlines had just rewritten her entire existence in one reckless act. He guided her through the crowd, his every movement rehearsed perfection. Cameras followed. Whispers trailed. His hand on her back was both shield and shackle. He leaned down once more, his tone almost teasing. "Congratulations, Mrs. Valencia. You're officially off the suspect list." Outside the ballroom, chaos waited, reporters, flashbulbs, questions slicing through the night. "Mr. Valencia, is it true you're married? Who is she? Was this planned?" Alexander opened the car door for her, his composure chillingly intact. His fingers brushed hers, just enough to send a jolt through her, as he murmured, "If you want to survive this, don't contradict me." Then he turned to face the press, his expression transforming into that dangerous, camera-ready smile that could charm the world and conceal the truth. Amber sat inside the car, frozen, staring at her reflection in the tinted glass. Her pulse thundered. Her entire body trembled with adrenaline and disbelief. Just 12 hours ago, she'd been invisible. Now she was a headline. "Act like you're my wife." The words replayed in her mind, echoing louder each time, until she didn't know if she wanted to scream or laugh. She didn't understand his game, his motive, only that her name, her reputation, and her life were no longer her own. When the car pulled away and the ballroom lights disappeared behind them, she pressed a trembling hand to her chest, as if to hold herself together. She whispered, almost to herself, "What just happened? Speech balloon, what would you do if the most powerful man in the room claimed you as his wife?" Comment your reaction below. By morning, the world had devoured her name. Amber Evans. It was splashed across every major business network, her face frozen mid-blink beside headlines that screamed "Mystery Wife of Valencia Global CEO Uncovered." The story had already mutated into wild conspiracy theories, secret marriage, insider connections, hidden inheritance. Amber barely managed to pull herself together as she stood in front of Valencia Tower, a sleek glass fortress that seemed to rise endlessly into the clouds. The building was a statement in steel and intimidation, and this morning it felt like a judgmental god staring down at her. Security waved her through without a word. Clearly, she was expected. The elevator ride was silent except for the low hum of classical music. As the numbers climbed, so did her anxiety. Every rational thought screamed that this was a trap, that she was about to be fired, sued, maybe even arrested. But when the elevator doors opened on the top floor, she didn't find the cold chaos of a legal inquisition. She found calm, precision, power. The executive floor was all glass and shadow, the city sprawling beneath it like a living organism. A woman in a tailored suit, Alexander's assistant, no doubt, escorted her down a long corridor to a door of frosted glass. "Mr. Valencia will see you now," the woman said. Amber stepped inside. The office was enormous, framed by a panoramic skyline. Alexander Valencia stood with his back to her, hands clasped behind him as the morning sun painted his suit in muted silver. When he finally turned, it was with the detached grace of someone who owned every second of silence between them. "Miss Evans," he said evenly, "I trust you slept well after last night's performance?" Amber's voice wavered before she steadied it. "If by performance you mean the public execution of my dignity, then yes, it was unforgettable." Something flickered in his expression. Not guilt, not amusement, just mild curiosity. "You handled yourself better than most would have. That's why you're here." "Why I'm here," she repeated. "To be fired? To be useful." Her pulse quickened. "Useful." He gestured to the sleek digital screen behind his desk. With a swipe, it illuminated with news feeds, photos, and videos from the gala. Every channel showed the same thing. Alexander Valencia shielding a woman the media now called his wife. "If I deny it," he said, pacing slowly, "it opens the company to scrutiny. Insider trading rumors, false leaks, stock instability, chaos. My investors hate chaos. And if you don't deny it?" He stopped in front of her. "Then the lie becomes truth. Temporarily." Amber blinked. "Temporarily." He pressed a button on his desk. A hidden panel slid open, revealing a slim black folder. He placed it in front of her. A contract. "Read it." The paper was thick, expensive. The kind that smelled faintly of ink and inevitability. Amber hesitated, then opened it. The document was concise and terrifying. 6 months. She would publicly act as Mrs. Valencia, attend events, play the perfect wife, maintain appearances. In exchange, all charges against her would be dropped. Her debts erased. Her reputation restored. Her throat went dry. You're serious? Completely. This is insane. Perhaps, he said coolly, but necessary. For both of us. Amber flipped to the final page, the section titled Article 9, the emotional clause. She read it once. Then again. Neither party shall form romantic or emotional attachment. Violation results in immediate termination and nullification of benefits. Her eyes lifted. You're kidding. Alexander didn't blink. I don't do love, Miss Evans. It's a distraction. A liability I can't afford. You wrote this yourself? I oversaw it. My lawyers lack imagination. Amber laughed under her breath, the sound brittle. You're unbelievable. And yet here you are. She wanted to throw the folder at him. Wanted to shout that this was the most manipulative thing anyone had ever proposed to her. But behind his polished indifference, she caught something else. Weariness, perhaps. Or pain, buried so deep it refused to die. You think this is just business, she said. I know it is. And what happens if your board finds out it's fake? They won't. Unless you tell them. Her anger simmered beneath her fear. And if I refuse? Then, he said softly, I clear my name by ensuring you take the fall for the breach. And I have enough evidence, fabricated or not, to make sure you never work in tech again. It wasn't shouted. It didn't need to be. His calm made the threat colder, sharper. Amber's breath hitched. You'd ruin me. I'd protect my company. Same thing. He turned back to the skyline, as if the matter was already settled. She stared at the contract in her hands, the cruel logic of it all. 6 months of pretending. Of cameras, interviews, lies. She'd lose her privacy, her independence, her peace. But at least she wouldn't lose her life's work. Her mother's voice echoed in her mind, that soft, steady tone she used to use when Amber was young and afraid. You don't have to like the choice, baby. You just have to survive it. She picked up the pen. Her hand trembled only once. The sound of her signature was louder than her heartbeat. Alexander didn't move, didn't even smile. He simply walked back to his desk, pressed another button, and the black folder vanished back into its compartment like a secret swallowed whole. It's done then, he said quietly. Welcome to your new life, Mrs. Valencia. Amber looked up sharply. You don't even sound human when you say things like that. He met her gaze, and for the briefest second, the mask slipped. Just enough for her to see a flicker of something haunted behind his composure. Then it was gone. You'll be assigned a stylist, a media coach, and a driver, he continued, all business once more. Your first public appearance as my wife will be Friday evening at the Valencia Foundation fundraiser. I suggest you practice smiling. Amber stood, her chair scraping softly against the marble floor. You're really proud of yourself, aren't you? Pride, he said, adjusting his cufflinks, is just another form of control. She wanted to scream, but instead, she forced a brittle smile. Then I guess you're in perfect control, Mr. Valencia. Always, he said, though the word seemed to cost him something. As she turned to leave, his voice followed her, low, even impossible to ignore. Amber. She paused at the door. His eyes met hers, unreadable, intense. Remember the clause. I wasn't planning on falling in love, she said. Good, he replied softly. Neither was I. The elevator doors closed between them, sealing the words like a vow. Outside, the city pulsed, unaware that a single signature had just rewritten 2 lives. Amber pressed a trembling hand against her chest as the elevator descended. She didn't know what terrified her more, the threat she'd just agreed to, or the man who made her agree. What kind of person signs away their heart before realizing it was already in danger? The doors slid open to the lobby, and the world greeted her with flashing cameras and questions she couldn't yet answer. She walked forward, chin high, pretending she knew how to play this new game. But deep down, she already sensed the truth. Alexander Valencia wasn't just testing her loyalty. He was testing himself, and one of them was bound to break first. If you were Amber, would you sign that contract? Comment below. I want to know what you'd do in her place. Amber froze, her breath catching as the screen glowed faintly in the dark car. The sender was untraceable. No name, no number, just those 8 chilling words. They're already watching you. Her first instinct was to delete it, pretend she hadn't seen it, but her hand wouldn't move. By the time she lifted her eyes, the car was already gliding through downtown. Skyscrapers glittered like frozen stars, glass towers slicing through a bruised morning sky. The city looked the same, but her life had quietly shifted into another orbit. One where privacy was currency, and lies were armor. Outside the tinted window, digital billboards were already screaming headlines she couldn't escape. Secret wife of Valencia global CEO revealed. Inside the private life of a billion-dollar power couple. Who is Amber Evans? Her photo, that single humiliating shot from the gala, was everywhere. Alexander's arm around her waist. His protective glare. Her startled expression. It looked like a love story. It was anything but. When she reached the penthouse, the reality of her new life hit harder than the headlines. Alexander's home, if it could be called that, wasn't a home at all. It was a museum of order and silence. A panoramic cage of glass and brushed steel that overlooked the entire city. The place had no warmth, no color. Just precision. His assistant, Evelyn, met her at the door, elegant, efficient, and expressionless. "You'll be staying in the East Suite, Mrs. Valencia," she said, as if rehearsed. "Your personal stylist, public relations coordinator, and media coach will arrive within the hour. Mr. Valencia has cleared your schedule for the next 2 days to prepare you for public appearances." Amber wanted to laugh. 2 days ago, she'd been behind a desk, buried in code. Now she needed a media coach to survive her own life. Her suite was beautiful but sterile, a soft beige echo of the rest of the apartment. Even her wardrobe had been replaced, her old clothes vanished, replaced by designer labels she couldn't pronounce. She caught her reflection in the mirror. Perfect makeup, sleek hair, diamond earrings she didn't own. A stranger stared back at her, polished, poised, and terrified. The intercom buzzed. "You're needed in the main conference room." It wasn't a request. Amber took a breath and followed the echo of her heels down the endless corridor. When she entered the room, Alexander was already there, seated at the head of the glass table. His suit was dark, his posture impeccable, his expression unreadable. On the wall behind him, 3 screens played loops of news coverage, every major outlet dissecting their secret marriage. His voice, when it came, was calm as ever. "You'll have to address them tomorrow." She blinked. "Address who?" "The press." "You're joking." He looked up at her, one eyebrow raised. "Does anything about me seem humorous?" Amber swallowed hard. I can't face the media. I'm not trained." He finished for her, standing slowly. "You will be." Evelyn entered with a folder and set it before Amber. Talking points, approved language, and a full media script. "Stick to it and you'll be fine." Amber flipped through the papers. Phrases jumped out at her. Private ceremony. Longtime confidant. Focus on charity work. Every word was a lie, wrapped in politeness. "So I'm supposed to play the perfect wife," she murmured. Alexander's gaze held hers. "You're not playing, Amber. You're protecting both of us." "Protecting," she snapped. "From what? The truth?" He didn't answer. He just turned toward the window, hands in his pockets, watching the clouds drift over the city. "The truth," he said quietly, "is overrated." Something in his voice made her pause. For a second, just a second, she wondered what kind of truth he was hiding from. The next day arrived Tucson. Amber stood on the marble steps of Valencia Global's headquarters, cameras flashing like lightning. The crowd of journalists surged forward, their voices overlapping in a sea of questions. Alexander appeared beside her, his hand resting lightly on the small of her back, firm, guiding, unshakable. The gesture was meant for optics, but the contact sent a confusing jolt through her. He leaned close, his breath brushing her ear. "Smile," he murmured. "The world's watching." She lifted her chin and faced the storm. The press conference began in a glittering atrium, cameras lined like weapons. Alexander spoke first, his tone steady, every syllable crafted with surgical precision. "I value my privacy," he said to the room. "And it's true, I recently married someone who values hers as well. Amber and I wanted to keep our personal lives separate from business, but unfortunately, last week's charity event made that impossible. We hope for your respect as we continue our work together." Then it was her turn. Amber stepped up to the microphone, her palms damp despite the cool air. Dozens of cameras zoomed in. Her name echoed through whispers and murmurs. She forced her voice to stay calm. "Thank you. I'm grateful for everyone's support. I've worked with Valencia Global for years, and I'm proud to stand beside a man who believes in integrity, innovation, and second chances. The last part wasn't in the script, but it slipped out before she could stop it. For a heartbeat, Alexander's eyes flickered toward her, something unreadable passing between them. Then the room erupted in flashes again. Reporters shouted questions. When's the honeymoon? Where did you meet? Are you planning a family? Alexander cut through the noise with a smile sharp enough to draw blood. That will be all for today. He guided her out with his hand on her back again, a public gesture of ownership that somehow felt protective and suffocating all at once. Inside the car, the silence was deafening. You went off script, he said finally. I told the truth. He looked out the window, jaw tight. The truth is rarely the smart choice. She turned toward him. Do you ever get tired of pretending? His gaze slid to hers. Do you? The question lingered between them, heavy and dangerous. The days that followed blurred into one another. Interviews, photo shoots, orchestrated appearances. The city seemed to pulse with their story, every corner alive with gossip about the Valencias. At night, Amber retreated to her suite, exhausted from smiling. The penthouse was quiet except for the distant hum of the city below. Sometimes, she'd hear Alexander in the next room. Low phone calls, terse conversations, always about the same thing, the merger. One evening, unable to sleep, she stepped out of her room and followed the sound of voices down the hall. The double doors to the boardroom were slightly ajar. Inside, Alexander stood at the head of the table, flanked by executives. Jeremy Haynes was there, his tone oily and insincere. We can't ignore the data leak, Alexander. Someone's still inside your system. I'm aware, Alexander replied, voice cool. Handle it quietly. We can't risk the investors finding out before the merger. Amber froze. The data leak. It hadn't been resolved. If anything, it was getting worse. Her fingers tightened around the doorframe. Someone had used her ID once. If it happened again. Jeremy's voice carried again, low but venomous. We both know who the weak link is. Alexander's tone sharpened. Choose your next words carefully. There was silence, then laughter, polite but edged. Amber slipped away before they noticed her. Her pulse hammered as she hurried back to her suite. The lie she was living wasn't just about marriage. It was part of something larger, something dangerous. If someone inside Valencia Global was manipulating the system, her fake marriage might be more than PR damage control. It could be a cover for war. That night, she sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the city through the glass walls. Somewhere below, traffic glittered like veins of light. But up here, in Alexander's penthouse, everything felt like suspended time. Beauty balanced over secrets. Her phone buzzed again. A message. No name. No number. Just the same chilling clarity as before. You should have stayed quiet. Wives can disappear too. Amber's fingers went numb. She looked around the room, every shadow suddenly alive, every glint of light a potential eye. She wasn't just part of Alexander's lie anymore. She was part of someone's plan. Would you risk staying in Alexander's world or run the moment that message arrived? Comment below. Your thoughts matter. Amber sat frozen, the glow of the black screen reflecting in her wide eyes. The message pulsed in her mind like a heartbeat she couldn't quiet. Her suite was silent except for the faint hum of the penthouse's central air. Somewhere beyond the walls, the city pulsed, alive, indifferent, glittering with the same lies that had trapped her here. Her fingers trembled as she set the phone down, glancing toward the door. She half expected someone to be standing there, watching. But there was only stillness. The emptiness of the room pressed in, as if the glass walls themselves were holding their breath. In that moment, Amber realized she wasn't just being threatened. She was being studied. She hardly slept that night. Every creak of the penthouse sounded like footsteps, every shadow stretched too long. When dawn broke, she found herself standing at the window, watching the city burn gold under the sunrise. Alexander's world looked beautiful from a distance, but up close it was made of knives. By the time she reached the dining hall, the morning had already begun with military precision. Alexander sat at the long glass table, reading 3 screens at once. The faint clink of his coffee cup was the only sound between them. He looked up when she entered, his expression unreadable, like always. You didn't sleep, he said. It wasn't a question. Neither did you, she replied quietly, taking a seat opposite him. He gave a dry smile, the kind that never reached his eyes. Sleep is a poor use of time when there's a company to keep alive. Amber stirred her tea, studying him. Is that how you survive everything? Efficiency over emotion. His gaze flicked toward her, sharp and assessing. Emotion is a luxury, not a strategy. She leaned back, her tone colder than she meant it to be. You say that like you actually believe it. He didn't respond, just returned his attention to the tablet in front of him. But his jaw tightened slightly, and she caught the faintest flicker of irritation. They ate in silence after that, both pretending not to notice the electricity humming between them. By evening, they were back in the spotlight. The Valencia Global Annual Investors Gala was a blur of diamonds, champagne, and whispered gossip. Cameras flashed, champagne flowed, and the city's elite swirled like constellations of wealth around them. Amber's gown shimmered gold under the chandeliers, her hand tucked into the crook of Alexander's arm. They moved through the room as if choreographed, him, the picture of command, her, the embodiment of grace. But beneath the surface, every step felt like a test. You're doing well, he murmured, leaning close enough that his breath brushed her ear. She managed a smile. You sound surprised. He gave a soft, humorless laugh. I rarely underestimate. But I never expected you to adapt this quickly. His hand lingered on her waist a fraction too long, and the air between them thickened. She looked up at him, eyes catching the faint light. Be careful, Mr. Valencia. Someone might think you're enjoying yourself. His lips curved, but his eyes stayed cool. Someone might think you're flirting. Maybe I am. The words slipped out before she could stop them. Alexander's expression didn't change, not immediately, but something in his posture did. His fingers tightened almost imperceptibly on her waist, a reaction he tried and failed to hide. For the first time, the perfect facade cracked. The orchestra began to play. A waltz. Reporters turned toward them expectantly, cameras raised. Alexander extended a hand. We might as well give them what they want. Amber hesitated, but the look in his eyes, steady, commanding, dangerous, left her no room for argument. She placed her hand in his, and they stepped onto the dance floor. The crowd parted, giving them space. At first, the movements were mechanical, elegant, practiced, perfect for the cameras. But as the music swelled, something changed. Alexander's grip softened, his thumb brushing the back of her hand in a silent rhythm. Their bodies fell into sync, breath against breath, heartbeat against heartbeat. Smile, he murmured through the choreography. I can't when you're staring at me like that, she whispered back. He leaned closer, his voice barely audible over the music. Like what? Like you're trying to read me. His reply came low and deliberate. I already have. Her pulse stuttered. For a fleeting moment, she forgot the cameras, the lie, the contract. All she could feel was him, solid, warm, alive. The room blurred into gold and sound, the world narrowing to the space between them. And then it was over. Applause erupted. The cameras flashed again. The mask slipped back over Alexander's face. He stepped back, offering a polite smile that felt colder than winter glass. Amber forced herself to match it. When the gala ended, they rode back to the penthouse in silence. The car was dark except for the soft glow of city lights passing through the tinted windows. Finally, she spoke. You hide behind logic because it's easier than being human. His eyes flicked toward her. Feelings make people weak. I can't afford weakness. You think love is weakness? I think love is leverage, he said quietly. And I don't give people weapons. Amber stared at him, at the quiet storm behind his calm. Then what do you have left? He didn't answer, but his reflection in the glass looked tired, haunted even. And for the first time, she wondered if Alexander Valencia had ever allowed himself to feel anything at all. Days passed, and the lie grew heavier. The tabloids fed on every move they made, dissecting their smiles, their body language, their supposed chemistry. Meanwhile, Amber's instincts kept prickling. Something beneath the surface of Valencia Global wasn't right. Late one night, while reviewing the company's internal database logs, she noticed a pattern: repeated access to restricted files under her employee ID. The timestamps didn't match her work hours. Someone was using her identity again. Her stomach dropped. She dove deeper into the logs, tracing the access trail through encrypted folders. Each attempt was masked by complex rerouting scripts, the kind only someone inside the security division could execute. Someone with authority. Someone close to Alexander. Every instinct screamed that this wasn't just about her. The data leak that started the scandal hadn't stopped. It had evolved. Amber began investigating in secret, careful to cover her tracks. She used the penthouse's secure server late at night when Alexander was in meetings or asleep, though she doubted he ever truly slept. One evening, she noticed something strange. The same encrypted file that had triggered the initial scandal had been accessed again, only hours earlier, from inside the building. And this time, the location matched one of the restricted sublevels of Valencia Tower, the data control wing. The only people with clearance down there were Alexander, Evelyn, and Jeremy Haynes. Amber's pulse quickened. She grabbed her ID and jacket and slipped out, moving quietly through the silent halls of the skyscraper. The corridors gleamed under the low security lights, reflecting her shadow across glass and chrome. By the time she reached the restricted floor, the clock had passed midnight. She swiped her badge, heart hammering. The door beeped green. Inside, the hum of servers filled the air, low, mechanical, steady. At the far end of the room, a figure stood by one of the terminals. Broad-shouldered, dark suit, perfectly still. "Jeremy," she called softly. He turned slowly, his expression unreadable. "Mrs. Valencia," he said smoothly, as if her presence were expected. "Working late." Amber took a step closer, her pulse racing. "What are you doing here?" He smiled, the kind of smile that carried no warmth. "I could ask you the same. I saw the logs. Someone's using my credentials to access restricted data. You're the head of security. Shouldn't you be investigating that?" Jeremy's eyes gleamed faintly under the blue light of the monitors. "Oh, I am. And so are the people watching you." Amber's stomach dropped. "What's that supposed to mean?" He stepped closer, the hum of the machines deepening around them. "It means curiosity is a dangerous habit. You're playing a part you don't understand." Her throat went dry. "Are you threatening me?" Jeremy leaned in, his voice a low, controlled whisper. "No, Mrs. Valencia. I'm warning you." He paused, letting the silence stretch, then added, his tone almost casual. "Be careful, Mrs. Valencia. Curiosity gets people fired or buried." Amber's heart pounded as he brushed past her, disappearing into the shadowed corridor. She stood there alone, surrounded by the hum of secrets. And for the first time since stepping into Alexander Valencia's world, she truly understood just how deep the danger ran. Do you think Jeremy's threat was real, or is someone else pulling the strings? Drop your theories in the comments. Amber barely slept that night. Every time she closed her eyes, Jeremy's words replayed like a curse. Curiosity gets people fired or buried. The phrase echoed through the marble silence of the penthouse long after dawn broke. By morning, she was still trembling, not just from fear, but from anger. The next day, Alexander's assistant, Evelyn, summoned her to prepare for an important event. "Investor relations," she said briskly, adjusting Amber's fitted navy dress. "Every move matters today. Every word." Amber stared at her reflection in the mirror, poised, polished, the perfect illusion of a millionaire's wife. Her curls were tamed, her expression carefully neutral, her diamond wedding band catching the light. Yet behind her calm eyes, suspicion simmered. She'd been framed once. She wouldn't let it happen again. When the black car pulled up to the Valencia Global Investor Forum, the plaza outside was already crawling with reporters. Cameras flashed, voices called their names, and the crowd surged as Alexander stepped out first, immaculate as ever in a charcoal suit. Amber followed, her hands sliding into his as they faced the chaos together. The cameras loved them, the powerful CEO and his mysterious wife. They smiled, they waved, and the press ate it up. But Amber could feel Alexander's grip tighten slightly, a silent warning that today, of all days, they couldn't afford mistakes. Inside, the ballroom glittered with polished glass and gold. The event was live-streamed globally, every investor, every partner, every rival watching. Alexander moved with the same cold precision that ruled his boardroom, his voice smooth as he addressed the crowd about innovation, expansion, and the merger that could redefine his empire. Amber played her part, sitting beside him, nodding when expected, smiling on cue. But beneath the glamour, her thoughts were elsewhere, on the data breach, on Jeremy's warning, on the dark web of deceit closing around them both. Then it happened. During the Q&A session, a voice cut through the polite applause. "Mr. Valencia," a journalist called out from the press pit, a woman in a sharp red blazer with a knowing smile. "I have a question about your marriage." Amber's stomach dropped. Alexander's tone stayed perfectly calm. "Go ahead." The journalist held up a tablet, zooming in on an image projected on the massive screen behind her. It was a still frame, a high-resolution photo taken at the charity gala. Amber, standing alone under the chandeliers, before Alexander had intervened. Her hand bare. No ring. The reporter's voice sliced through the silence like a blade. "If you were married before that night, as your company's PR statement claims, why wasn't Mrs. Valencia wearing a wedding ring?" Gasps rippled through the audience. Investors exchanged looks. The cameras zoomed in on Amber's face. Alexander's mask slipped, just slightly, but it was enough. Amber felt every pair of eyes in the room pin her down. Her throat tightened. She started, but Alexander's voice interrupted, smooth yet dangerous. "That photo," he said evenly, "was taken seconds before I gave her the ring." The journalist smiled. "How convenient. Care to prove it?" A murmur rolled through the crowd. Amber felt heat rise up her neck. This was more than embarrassment. It was exposure. If this lie unraveled, the contract, the company's reputation, and her safety would collapse with it. She glanced at Alexander. His jaw was clenched, his eyes flickering between fury and calculation. The silence stretched, the tension thick enough to choke. And then, in one breathtaking instant, Alexander moved. He turned toward her, his hand slipping to the back of her neck, and before she could even react, he kissed her. The world stopped. The cameras exploded in flashes. Gasps rippled through the room, then applause, then chaos. But Amber heard none of it, just the wild rush of her heartbeat as his lips pressed against hers. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was urgent, claiming, dangerous, the kind of kiss that burned away logic and left nothing but raw instinct. For a split second, she forgot the crowd, the cameras, the contract. There was only him, his hand in her hair, his heartbeat syncing with hers, the taste of something she'd never admit she wanted. Then it was over. Alexander pulled away first, his expression unreadable, but his breathing uneven. The crowd erupted in delighted applause, the PR cameras capturing every angle. He gave a controlled smile, his hand sliding down to her waist as he addressed the audience with practiced calm. "I hope that answers your question," he said smoothly, voice steady even as his pulse thundered. The journalist, flustered, lowered her tablet. The tension broke. Laughter, clinking glasses, applause. The crowd moved on, satisfied by the spectacle. But Amber couldn't breathe. She stayed frozen, her fingers still tingling where he had touched her. The air around her felt too thin, too electric. When the cameras turned elsewhere, she stepped back. "You shouldn't have done that," she whispered. Alexander's eyes darkened. "It worked." "That's not the point," she said, her voice shaking. "You used me." He looked down at her, emotion flickering behind the ice. "I protected you." "From what?" Her voice cracked. "The truth." He didn't answer. Amber turned and walked away, her heels echoing across the marble floor. Cameras followed her briefly before focusing back on the next speaker. Alexander watched her go, his hand still curled into a fist. That night, the penthouse was silent. Amber shut herself in her suite, staring at her reflection in the mirror, her face pale, her lips still faintly swollen. She touched them unconsciously and felt her heart lurch. It wasn't supposed to mean anything. It couldn't mean anything, but it did. That kiss wasn't performance. It was confession. She sat on the edge of her bed, tears burning behind her eyes. How could one moment, one act of impulse, unravel everything she'd worked to control? She was supposed to be strong, untouchable, professional. But Alexander had touched something deeper than she wanted to admit. Meanwhile, across the hall, Alexander sat alone in his study, a half-empty glass of whiskey on the table beside him. The skyline glowed outside, fractured by rain. His tie was undone, his sleeves rolled to his elbows, the mask of the CEO finally gone. He replayed the moment again and again. The heat, the shock, the way she trembled beneath his hands. It hadn't been part of the plan. He'd meant it as strategy. But when his lips met hers, strategy had disappeared. He slammed his glass down, the sound echoing like gunfire. Fool. The clause. The one rule that kept this arrangement safe, unbroken. No emotional attachment. No intimacy. And now, in front of the entire world, he'd shattered it. He leaned forward, his head in his hands, the storm outside reflecting the one inside him. He'd built his empire on control, precision, distance, and in one impulsive act, he'd undone years of self-discipline. The contract wasn't just words anymore. It was a ticking bomb. By morning, the world had exploded. The video of the kiss had gone viral, replayed across every news outlet, dissected in slow motion by gossip channels. Headlines screamed, "Valencia CEO's passionate kiss sends stocks soaring. Love or lie? The truth behind the power couple." Amber's phone buzzed nonstop. Reporters camped outside Valencia Tower. Even Evelyn couldn't hide her smirk as she said, "Well, Mrs. Valencia, the world thinks you're quite the romantic." Amber ignored her, walking straight to the elevator. She felt exposed, suffocated, angry, at him, at herself, at how easily the lie had become her reality. When she reached the office floor, the atmosphere was different. Colder. Quieter. The boardroom glass doors were closed, but she could hear the muffled voices inside, raised, sharp, accusing. "Reckless behavior," one voice said. "Unprofessional," another barked. "He's losing focus over a woman." Her stomach turned. Through the glass, she saw Alexander standing at the head of the table, composed but tense. His jaw was locked, his hands clasped behind his back as the board members grilled him. She could only catch fragments. Image risk, investor confidence, leadership stability. Then, as if sensing her presence, his eyes lifted and found hers through the glass wall. For one long, silent second, they just stared at each other, 1,000 things unsaid between them. He didn't move. Neither did she. Finally, one of the board members said, "Alexander, this spectacle can't continue. It's a distraction. A liability." He didn't reply. But his gaze stayed on Amber's face, steady, unflinching, almost defiant. And she realized that behind that calm exterior, he was at war with himself. Later that evening, alone again, Amber watched the city lights flicker like restless thoughts. The contract clause replayed in her mind like a warning bell. Neither party will develop personal or emotional attachment. But it was already too late. They had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. And somewhere deep down, Amber knew, this kiss wasn't the end of their lie. It was only the beginning of their undoing. Was Alexander protecting Amber, or protecting himself from feeling too much? What do you think that kiss truly meant? Comment below. The days that followed were a blur of chaos disguised as calm. Valencia Global's offices pulsed with the rhythm of crisis management. Lawyers whispering in corridors, journalists swarming the plaza, shareholders demanding reassurance. But beneath the surface shimmer of control, something darker brewed. Amber felt it in every glance that lingered too long, every hushed conversation that stopped when she entered a room. Her photo-filled gossip sites, her smile dissected by strangers debating whether she was a schemer or a savior. She'd stopped reading the headlines. Instead, she buried herself in her work, the only place she still felt some measure of control. Her fingers flew across the keyboard as she combed through server logs, cross-referencing timestamps, tracking anomalies. Somewhere, hidden beneath the noise, was the pattern she'd seen before, the signature of whoever had framed her at the gala. Hours passed. Then a flicker. A hidden subfolder buried deep within a network drive reserved for security backups. Encrypted. Masked under a decoy file labeled vendor contracts. Amber's pulse quickened. She bypassed the first layer of encryption easily. The second took longer, but when the code finally cracked, she froze. Dozens of emails filled the screen, each one between Jeremy Haynes, chief of security, and an address from Arctron Industries, Valencia's biggest rival. The language was careful but unmistakable. Payment transfers, data exchanges, scheduled leaks timed around major shareholder meetings. It was the proof she needed. The betrayal wasn't hers. It was his. Her breath trembled. For weeks, she'd been made to feel like an intruder in Alexander's world. But this, finally, was her redemption. She needed to tell him, to show him. But as she reached for her phone, The screen went black. Then the monitors. Then the lights. A system-wide shutdown. The floor around her buzzed with confusion. Analysts stood muttering. Then came the alarm, a low, pulsing tone that meant one thing: breach. Amber's stomach dropped. She ran to her terminal. The servers were being accessed remotely. Not by her. Not by anyone she recognized. Someone was hijacking the network from within the building. The system fought back, but too late. Files were already being copied, including the very emails she'd just uncovered. And then at the bottom of the log file, she saw it, her ID tag, her name, her credentials, her digital signature. Panic surged through her. "No," she whispered, typing furiously, trying to override the command. No, no, no. But it was done. The breach was complete, and the trail pointed straight to her. By the time Alexander called her into his office, she already knew. The quiet fur in his voice over the intercom had said enough. The glass doors hissed open, and she stepped inside. He was standing at the window, back to her, hands clasped behind him. The city stretched beneath them, a glittering empire that now felt like a cage. When he spoke, his tone was cold, surgical. "Do you have anything to say for yourself?" Amber swallowed hard. "Yes. I was about to show you proof." He turned then, his eyes sharp as blades. "Proof that you sold us out again?" Her breath caught. "That's not what happened." Alexander's jaw tightened. He held up a folder, thick, printed, damning. "Our servers were breached again last night. Financial data, client lists, merger details, all gone. And guess whose access key was used?" He threw the papers onto the desk. "Yours." Amber stared at the evidence, shaking her head. "Someone's framing me." "Jeremy." "Jeremy?" He cut in, voice rising. "My head of security? The man I've trusted for a decade? You expect me to believe he's the mole, not you. The woman who conveniently shows up in my life right before every leak." The accusation stung like a slap. "You think I did this? After everything?" His silence was worse than shouting. Amber stepped forward, trembling. "Alexander, listen to me. I found encrypted emails between Jeremy and Arcturon. They prove he's the one." "Stop." His voice was quiet this time, almost weary. He walked around the desk, picked up the contract, the one that had bound them together and kept them apart, and dropped it in front of her. "Do you remember this?" he asked softly. Amber's chest tightened. "Of course I do." He flipped to a page, his finger pressing down on a line highlighted in red. His eyes met hers, unreadable but full of storm. "Article 9, he said. "No emotions. No exceptions." Her heart cracked. "Alexander," he continued, his tone colder now. "You broke the rule, Amber. You let emotions cloud your judgment. And now the entire company is paying the price." Tears stung her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "I didn't betray you." He stepped closer, his voice low, almost pained. "You did the one thing I told you not to. You made this personal. You made me forget what happens when I trust someone." His words sliced deep, not because they were cruel, but because somewhere beneath them was grief. Amber's throat tightened. "You don't even see it, do you? You're not protecting your company anymore. You're just protecting your fear." His jaw flexed, but he didn't respond. Instead, he turned toward the door and pressed the intercom. "Evelyn, get legal in here. Terminate her contract and ensure she's escorted off the property." Amber's chest constricted. "You can't be serious." He didn't look at her. "This arrangement is over." The words hit harder than she expected. For a moment, she just stood there, the city spinning beyond the glass, the man who'd once saved her now condemning her without hesitation. When Evelyn entered with 2 security officers, Amber straightened. The tears finally came, hot and silent, but her voice was steady when she spoke. "Congratulations, Alexander." He finally looked up. There was something, a flicker, in his eyes. Regret, maybe, but not enough. Amber met his gaze one last time. "You wanted control." She stepped closer, her voice breaking but fierce. "Congratulations," she whispered. "You just lost everything that mattered." She turned and walked out, her heels clicking against the marble, the sound fading until it was gone. The elevator ride down from the top floor of Valencia Tower felt endless. As the numbers descended, so did the reality of it all. She'd lost her job, her reputation, and the fragile connection that had begun to heal something broken inside her. When the doors opened to the lobby, flashbulbs exploded. Reporters shouted questions, scandal headlines already spinning. CEO's secret wife fired amid espionage scandal. Amber didn't answer. She pushed through the crowd, past the cameras, into the cold rain outside. The wind caught her hair, the chill slicing through her thin coat. For a moment, she stood there on the steps, breathing hard, watching her reflection ripple in the puddles at her feet. Above her, the Valencia Tower loomed, glass, power, perfection. Inside, Alexander Valencia watched from his office window. Alone. The city lights blurred as rain streaked down the glass. Evelyn's voice echoed faintly behind him. "It's done. She's gone." He didn't respond. His hands were trembling, though he hid it by folding them behind his back. He told himself it was the right call. That she had broken his rules, compromised his empire, and deserved to go. But the lie tasted bitter. Because when she walked out that door, something inside him went with her. Down on the street, Amber took one last look up at the glowing tower before turning away. The rain soaked her hair, her dress, her skin, washing away the last traces of the world she'd been forced to live in. But beneath the heartbreak, something colder took root. Determination. If Alexander wouldn't believe her, she'd prove it herself. She'd find the real traitor, clear her name, and expose the truth, even if it meant burning his empire down to do it. Do you think Alexander truly believes Amber betrayed him? Or is he protecting himself from guilt? Comment your theory. The rain had not stopped when Amber reached her apartment. The same cramped one-bedroom she had left behind weeks ago when Alexander Valencia had turned her life upside down. The city lights flickered through the cracked blinds, throwing fractured shadows across her walls. It smelled faintly of dust, rain, and coffee grounds, the scent of her old life, one that now felt too small to contain the storm raging inside her. Her phone wouldn't stop buzzing. News alerts, messages, calls from blocked numbers. Amber Evans, the CEO's fake wife, accused of corporate betrayal. The headlines painted her as both criminal and fool, the analyst who seduced her boss and sold out his company. She threw the phone into the sink. The screen cracked, but it still buzzed, like it refused to let her forget. For a long time, she just stood there, staring out the window at the skyline that had once made her dream. Now, it only reminded her of what she had lost. But she wasn't broken. Not yet. Amber turned to her desk, the one cluttered with old hard drives, open notebooks, and the half-finished code from her freelance work. She connected her laptop to the last backup she'd made from Valencia Global System. Maybe, just maybe, she could still find a trace of the encrypted data before the system was purged. She worked through the night, exhaustion blurring her focus, her fingers trembling over the keyboard. The soft hum of rain and the clicking of keys were the only sounds in the silence. And through that silence came the ache, not just of betrayal, but of missing him. Alexander's voice still echoed in her mind, that cold finality when he'd said, "This arrangement is over." She hated that a part of her still longed for the warmth of his touch, the safety of his presence. Love, she thought bitterly, was the most dangerous condition of all. Meanwhile, across the city, inside the glass fortress of Valencia Tower, Alexander Valencia was unraveling. The penthouse that once felt like his sanctuary now felt suffocating. The whiskey burned, but it didn't help. He'd tried to drown his thoughts in work, in meetings, in strategies, but Amber's face kept intruding. Those defiant eyes, the tremble in her voice when she said, "You just lost everything that mattered." He told himself she'd lied, that she had betrayed him, like everyone else before her. That's what people did when they got close. They found a way to cut you. But then why did it feel like the knife was in his chest? A sharp knock broke his thoughts. "Come in," he said, his tone clipped. Eleanor Valencia, the board chair, the woman who had raised him after his parents' deaths, stepped inside. Her presence was calm, but her eyes, sharp and knowing, missed nothing. "You look like hell," she said, taking in his disheveled tie, the half-empty bottle on the table, the untouched food. He forced a smirk. "Good morning to you too." "It's evening, darling." She crossed the room and sat across from him, folding her hands. "I saw the footage. I saw how you looked at her. And I saw how you destroyed her." His jaw tightened. "Don't start, Eleanor." She ignored him. "You built this company out of nothing but precision and paranoia. But somewhere along the way, you started believing the only way to stay safe was to stay alone. That's not." You built walls so high, she interrupted, her voice low but fierce, that even truth can't reach you anymore. Alexander's eyes flickered with anger, then guilt. She betrayed me. I have proof. Proof, she repeated softly. Or projection. He turned away, looking out the window toward the rain-slicked skyline. The breach came from her access key. I had no choice. Eleanor leaned forward. Then prove it. You always demand evidence from everyone else. Demand it from yourself. Her words struck something inside him. He didn't answer. After she left, Alexander sat alone in the dim light, her words echoing in his mind like thunder. Hours later, he was back in his office, the glow of the monitors reflecting in his eyes. He pulled up the internal network logs again, the same ones the security team had used to incriminate Amber. But this time he looked deeper, past the surface entries, beneath the visible timestamps. And there it was, a trace anomaly, a secondary authentication key buried under her ID, something that didn't belong. He opened the security camera feeds from the night of the breach. The footage flickered to life, rows of empty offices, screens glowing, rain pelting the windows. Then movement, a shadow near the data server room. Alexander zoomed in. The man's face appeared, pale under the harsh fluorescent light. Jeremy Haynes. Alexander's blood ran cold. Jeremy typed something into the terminal, inserted a drive, and left minutes before the breach began. Then, an hour later, Amber entered the same room, confused, unaware she was walking straight into a trap. He leaned closer, his heart pounding. The truth hit him like a punch. Jeremy hadn't just framed her, he'd orchestrated everything. The leaks, the scandal, the setup. And beneath the metadata of the files he'd extracted, Alexander found an old code signature, one he hadn't seen in years. VLM-07. It was the same encryption format used in the attack that killed his fiancée 5 years ago. His hand trembled as he traced the file history. Back then, he'd believed her death was an accident, a security failure that had been his fault. But now, seeing that code again, he realized it was all connected. Jeremy had been working with Archeron Industries, even then. The data leak that had destroyed his personal life was the same one that was now destroying his company. He had spent years blaming love for his downfall, when in truth, it was betrayal disguised as loyalty. The weight of it crashed over him. His knees almost gave out. Amber had been innocent. Always. And he had destroyed her to protect a lie. For the first time in years, Alexander felt fear, not of losing control, but of realizing how wrong he had been. He replayed the moment in his mind. Amber's trembling voice, her eyes searching his for trust. You wanted control, Alexander. Congratulations, you just lost everything that mattered. She had been right. He slammed his fist against the desk, the sound echoing through the empty office. Papers flew. A picture frame fell, the one photo he still kept of his late fiancée, cracked now across the glass. Jeremy Haynes, he whispered, his voice shaking. You're finished. He picked up his phone. Evelyn, he said, voice steady despite the storm inside him. Pull every log Jeremy Haynes has touched in the last 3 months. I want his access revoked immediately. There was a pause. Sir, do it, he snapped. Then softer. And find me Amber Evans's address. He ended the call before she could respond. Outside the window, the storm was breaking. Lightning split the sky in 2 jagged, bright cleansing. For the first time since this nightmare began, Alexander Valencia felt something close to clarity. He'd made a mistake, a devastating one, but he wasn't going to let that be the end. He couldn't undo what he'd said, but he could make it right. He would find Amber. He would tell her the truth. And this time, he would protect her, not because it was convenient, but because he finally understood what it meant to care for someone without condition. No contracts, no clauses, no fear, just truth. That night, Amber sat by her window, laptop open, exhaustion heavy in her bones. The world outside was beginning to quiet, the rain easing into mist. She'd almost given up when her phone, cracked but still stubbornly alive, buzzed again. An unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. Amber Evans? The voice was female. Calm. Precise. This is Evelyn Price. I work for Mr. Valencia. You need to listen carefully. You're in danger. Amber froze. What? Jeremy Haynes knows you found the emails, Evelyn said quickly. He's gone off-grid. We think he might come after you. Mr. Valencia. The line crackled, then went dead. Amber stared at the screen, the message cutting off mid-sentence. Her pulse thundered. Somewhere, deep inside, she knew this wasn't over. Do you think Alexander can earn Amber's forgiveness after everything he's done? Comment your thoughts. Amber was right. It wasn't. The air in her apartment was heavy with silence. Her phone lay dead on the floor where she dropped it, Evelyn's warning still echoing in her ears. He might come after you. She rose slowly, locking the door, checking the window. The city beyond looked deceptively peaceful, lights glowing, taxis streaking through puddles, the hum of life continuing as if her world weren't about to implode again. Her laptop screen blinked. The cursor moved. On its own. Amber froze. Lines of code began to appear, gibberish at first, then clearer, deliberate. We see you. Her heart leapt into her throat. She ripped the power cord free and reached for her phone again. But before she could dial, the lights cut out. Darkness swallowed the room. Then came the sound. Footsteps in the hallway. Who's there? She whispered, her voice trembling. The lock clicked once. Twice. The door burst open. 2 men in black masks stormed inside. She barely had time to scream before a hand clamped over her mouth and a sharp sting burned the side of her neck. The world blurred. Rain. Tires screeching. Voices muffled through fog. Then nothing. When Amber came to, her wrists were bound, the air thick with the scent of rust and oil. A warehouse. The sound of rain hammering against corrugated metal echoed above her. Her head throbbed. Jeremy Haynes stood a few feet away, his suit drenched, his grin colder than the storm outside. Welcome back, Mrs. Valencia, he said mockingly. Or should I say, former Mrs. Valencia. Amber glared, her throat raw. You're making a mistake, Jeremy. The police. The police? He laughed, pacing in front of her. They're busy cleaning up the mess you helped create. Or did you think I wouldn't know you were digging around in my files? I know what you did, she shot back. The leaks, the merger sabotage, Alexander's fiancée. He stopped. For a moment, something flickered in his eyes. Pride or guilt, she couldn't tell. That woman died because she trusted him, he said quietly, almost to himself. Then louder, and so will you. Amber's pulse raced. She struggled against the rope cutting into her wrists. Why? What did he ever do to you? Jeremy's expression hardened. He ruined everything. 5 years ago, I was supposed to take over security for Archeron after they merged with Valencia. But his fiancée got too close to the truth. She found out the merger was a front for data laundering. So I made sure she disappeared. It was clean. Perfect. Until he started sniffing around again. Her stomach turned. You killed her. He smirked. Not directly. But I made sure she was in the car that night. The brakes failed. Amber's blood went cold. Jeremy crouched beside her, his voice dropping to a whisper. You should have stayed quiet, Amber. Curiosity kills more than cats in this business. She glared at him through tears, fury burning away her fear. You think Alexander won't find me? Jeremy's grin widened. He already has. That's what makes this so much fun. Across the city, inside Valencia Tower, Alexander was a storm of motion and fury. Trace her watch signal, he barked, pacing before a wall of monitors. Rain lashed the windows, thunder shaking the building. Evelyn's fingers flew over the keyboard. I'm trying, but they've jammed her signal. Wait there. A blinking dot appeared on the map. Industrial District. Old Portside Warehouse. Alexander grabbed his coat and gun. Sir, the police. He cut her off. I'm not waiting for them. Then at least take backup. He turned, eyes blazing. No one else gets hurt because of me again. And then he was gone, a blur through the storm, determination driving him faster than fear. The warehouse loomed out of the rain like a monster, dark, silent, waiting. Alexander stepped through the open gate, every sense alive. Lightning flashed, illuminating rows of shipping containers and glistening puddles. Somewhere inside, he could hear muffled voices. Jeremy's voice. He moved quietly, gun raised, following the sound until he reached the main floor. There she was, tied to a chair, soaked, terrified but still defiant. His chest tightened at the sight. Jeremy stood behind her, holding a small device, a detonator. Jeremy. Alexander shouted, stepping into the light. Let her go. Jeremy turned, smiling. Alexander. Right on time. I was beginning to think you didn't care enough to come. You're finished, Alexander growled. I know everything. The fiancé, the leaks, Arcturon. Oh, come on, Jeremy said, laughing. You think you can walk in here with a gun and fix years of your mistakes? He waved the detonator. I could blow half this place before you take another step. Amber met Alexander's eyes, her expression fierce. Don't listen to him. He's lying. He wants you angry. Jeremy's voice dropped, cruel and calm. You always did fall for the wrong women, Alex. First the one who got herself killed, now this one. How many times do you need to learn the same lesson? Rage exploded in Alexander's chest. He fired. The shot grazed Jeremy's arm, sending the detonator flying. Jeremy lunged for cover behind the crates. Amber, run! Alexander shouted, but her wrists were still tied. He sprinted to her, cutting the rope with his knife, just as Jeremy fired back. Bullets tore through the air, splintering wood and glass. Amber dropped to the ground, crawling toward the control terminal she'd spotted earlier. Alexander, she called out. The system, it's still active. He turned just in time to see her hacking into the control panel, fingers flying over the touchscreen. Sparks flew as Jeremy fired again. Stop her! Jeremy roared. Amber ignored him. She found the command sequence, heart hammering. Lockdown override. She hit enter. A metallic screech echoed through the warehouse as steel shutters dropped over the exits, sealing them inside. Jeremy's eyes went wide. What did you do? Amber rose slowly, standing beside Alexander now. I trapped you, she said, voice steady despite the trembling in her hands. Sirens wailed outside, distant at first, then closer, louder. The police were coming. Jeremy lunged for his gun, but Alexander was faster. The two men collided in a brutal fight, fists, fury, and years of buried guilt exploding at once. Rain poured through the broken skylight above, soaking them both as they fought. You killed her, Alexander roared, slamming Jeremy against the metal railing. You destroyed everything. Jeremy grinned through bloodied teeth. And you believed me. You always do. Alexander hesitated, just for a moment, and Jeremy seized the chance, pulling a hidden knife. But before he could strike, Amber shouted, Alex, and swung a metal pipe across Jeremy's arm. The knife clattered to the ground. Alexander caught Jeremy by the collar, his voice raw. You said love makes you weak. Jeremy spat blood. It does. Alexander's eyes darkened. You're wrong. He shoved him backward into the control terminal. Electricity arced, blinding light filling the room. Jeremy screamed, then went still. The smell of ozone hung heavy in the air. Amber's body shook as she dropped the pipe. Is he? Alexander nodded. It's over. The sound of police sirens and flashing red lights filled the warehouse. Officers poured in, weapons raised, shouting commands. Alexander raised his hands, his coat dripping rain and blood. He's the one you want, he said hoarsely, nodding toward Jeremy's motionless form. He framed her. She's innocent. The officers rushed past him, confirming what the surveillance feeds already showed. The evidence she'd just uploaded from the control terminal. It was over. Finally over. Alexander turned to Amber. Her eyes were glassy, her body trembling from shock and exhaustion. Without a word, he stepped forward and pulled her into his arms. She collapsed against him, her sobs muffled against his chest. The storm outside softened into steady rain. He brushed a strand of wet hair from her face, his thumb lingering against her cheek. Amber, he whispered, his voice breaking. The condition was never for you. It was for me. Because I knew I'd fall in love with you the moment I met you. Her tears mixed with the rain. Then why make it a rule at all? He smiled weakly. Because I was a coward. But not anymore. For the first time, he kissed her, not out of performance, not for cameras, but as a man surrendering his armor. When the sirens finally faded and the officers led Jeremy's body away, Alexander held her tighter, feeling the weight of the world lift just enough for both of them to breathe again. Amber looked up at him, her voice barely a whisper. What happens now? He smiled faintly, pressing his forehead to hers. Now, he said softly, we start over. No contracts. No lies. Just us. Her eyes closed, a tear slipping free. For the first time in what felt like forever, she felt safe. What did you think of Alexander's confession? Was it too late, or just in time? Comment down below. The days that followed were a blur of recovery, both physical and emotional. The storm had passed, leaving behind the scent of rain and the slow, uncertain quiet that comes after survival. Amber Evans spent the next few weeks away from Valencia Tower, away from the noise of reporters and boardrooms. The police had confirmed everything. Jeremy Haynes had been the mole, the one behind the leaks, the betrayal, and the death that had haunted Alexander for years. His confession had been found in the encrypted files Amber had risked her life to uncover. She should have felt vindicated, and she did in moments, but mostly she felt tired, exhausted in a way that lived in her bones. Her injuries healed, but her heart needed time. So she returned to something simpler, the part of herself that had existed long before data analysis, corporate schemes, and fake marriages. She painted again. Her studio apartment was small but filled with light. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, landing on unfinished canvases that smelled faintly of oil and turpentine. The city outside was alive, yet this space felt timeless, a refuge where she could finally breathe. Every stroke of the brush steadied her heartbeat. Every color on the canvas felt like a new beginning. Still, sometimes she caught herself glancing at her wrist, where her smartwatch had once been. He had tracked her through that signal, through that fragile connection. The same man who had once broken her heart and then saved her life. Alexander Valencia. She hadn't seen him since that night in the warehouse. Alexander had thrown himself into rebuilding what was left of his company, and his conscience. The headlines had shifted from scandal to redemption. Valencia Global CEO exposes espionage network. Security chief implicated in corporate crimes. But success no longer tasted like victory. Because every time he stepped into the boardroom, he saw her in his mind, the way she had looked at him when she said, "You wanted control, Alexander. Congratulations, you just lost everything that mattered." He had earned back his empire, but it meant nothing without her. He'd visited her apartment several times, but each time he stopped short of knocking. She deserved peace, not another storm. He told himself he would give her space, but every day without her stretched like punishment. Until the morning, he couldn't stand it anymore. Amber was standing in front of her easel, hair pulled into a messy bun, wearing an old shirt streaked with paint. The sunlight painted her in gold. She didn't hear the knock at first, so when she turned and saw him standing in her doorway, her breath caught. He looked different, softer somehow. The cold precision in his eyes had melted into something human, something real. "Alexander," she said quietly. "Amber," he replied just as softly. For a moment, neither of them moved. The space between them felt thick with everything unsaid, guilt, longing, forgiveness. "I didn't think you'd come," she said finally. "I wasn't sure I should," he admitted. "But there's something I need to say, and something I need to give you." She set her brush down carefully, wiping her hands on a rag. "If it's another contract, you can save yourself the ink." He smiled faintly. "In a way, it is, but not like before." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a single folded sheet of paper. No lawyer's headers, no legal seals. Just his handwriting. Amber frowned, taking it carefully. The paper was thick, the ink slightly smudged where his hand had pressed too hard. At the top, in neat block letters, it read, "New contract." Below it, only a few lines. Clause 1, no clauses. Clause 2, no conditions. Clause 3, just us. At the bottom, his signature. Beneath it, a blank line with her name written softly beside it. Amber looked up, her throat tightening. "This isn't funny." He shook his head. "It's not supposed to be. I spent years building walls to keep people out, thinking it would make me stronger. But when you walked into my life, even by accident, you tore them down. I didn't know how to handle it, so I did what I always do. I controlled. I destroyed." His voice cracked. "But you stayed honest, even when I didn't deserve it. You made me want something real again. And for the first time, I don't want to negotiate the terms." Amber blinked back tears. "You really think you can fix this with one page and a few pretty words?" He smiled sadly. "No, but I thought it might be a good place to start." She stared at the paper again, at the sincerity in every stroke of ink. Then she sighed, a quiet, shaky laugh slipping out. You're impossible. I'm persistent, he corrected. Amber met his eyes, the same eyes that had once terrified her, fascinated her, and finally taught her what love looked like when it wasn't safe but true. Slowly, she picked up a pen from the table and signed her name beneath his. When she looked up, his expression broke into a smile that was small but unguarded. The kind of smile that came from someone who had stopped running from himself. "So," she said softly, handing it back, "what happens now?" He folded the paper carefully, tucking it into his jacket pocket. "Now," he said, "I do this the right way." Before she could ask what he meant, he dropped to one knee. Amber froze. "Alexander." He pulled out a small velvet box. No conditions. No contracts. Just one question. He opened it, revealing a simple ring, elegant, understated, but shining with meaning. "Will you marry me, Amber Evans?" Her vision blurred. For a heartbeat, she couldn't speak. The man before her wasn't the cold, unreachable CEO who had once whispered, "Act like you're my wife," to save his empire. He was just Alexander, vulnerable, flawed, human. "Yes," she whispered finally, "but only if you promise one thing." He smiled. "Anything. No more contracts." He laughed softly. "Deal." A month later, under the dazzling chandeliers of another grand ballroom, Amber Evans walked through the glittering crowd again. Not as an outsider, but as herself. The Valencia Foundation was hosting a charity gala, the same event where their strange, fateful story had begun. The press whispered as they entered together, hand in hand. This time, there were no rumors to hide, no cameras to deceive. Alexander leaned down, his breath brushing her ear, his tone low and teasing. "Déjà vu." She smiled. "Feels different." He glanced around at the reporters, the glittering lights, the sea of curious eyes. Then he whispered again, the same line that had started everything, but with new warmth, new promise. "Act like you're my wife." Amber turned to face him fully, her eyes glowing. No need to act anymore. He smiled, that rare, unguarded smile, and pulled her close. The music swelled as they began to dance, the world fading around them. It was the same ballroom, the same chandeliers, but this time, it wasn't performance. It was peace. And when he whispered her name against her ear, Amber realized something she'd always known but never dared to say. That sometimes love doesn't begin with perfection. It begins with chaos. And that the bravest thing two broken people can do is choose each other anyway.
Thank you for watching all the way to the end. If this story moved you, the next one will hit even deeper. It's more gripping, more unexpected, and waiting for you right now. Don't hesitate. Click the video on your screen, and I'll see you in the next story.